The crystalline walls of the Galactic Assembly Hall stretched impossibly high, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that translated the countless languages of the member species into visual displays. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation's modest platform, her dark eyes scanning the vast amphitheater where representatives from over 300 civilizations gathered in their respective atmospheric pods and gravity wells. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 months, ever since the Assembly had finally agreed to hear humanity's petition for membership. The preparation felt hollow now. Everything had changed 3 days ago when the reports came in from Kepler 442b, humanity's newest colony world. The Assembly speaker, a towering crystalline being from the Valix Confederation, raised what passed for its hand. The chamber fell silent, translation matrices humming to life across thousands of communication devices. The Assembly recognizes the petition of Species Designation 7891, Humans of Sol System, the speaker announced, its voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that made all universal translators vibrate in unison. Ambassador Chen, you may present your case for provisional membership status. Sarah stepped forward, her magnetic boots clicking against the platform's metal surface. Around her, she felt the weight of countless alien gazes, some curious, some dismissive, many completely indifferent. Humanity was just another backwater species seeking the protection and trade benefits of Assembly membership. She had seen the reports. In the past millennium, over 10,000 species had made similar petitions. Less than 12% had been accepted, but that was before Kepler 442b. Before she knew what some of these civilizations were really capable of. Honored representatives, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. Humanity comes before this assembly not just seeking membership, but seeking justice. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles twitched in what their species considered polite interest. The hive mind collective of the Nexus began their characteristic harmonic humming as they processed this unexpected deviation from standard petition protocols. Sarah had planned to follow the script. Present humanity's achievements, their technological contributions, their peaceful expansion across 12 star systems. She had charts showing human agricultural innovations, medical breakthroughs, and artistic achievements, all carefully prepared to meet the Assembly's criteria for what they deemed a civilized species. The holographic display behind her flickered to life, but instead of showing humanity's accomplishments, it displayed the transmitted images from Kepler 442b, images that had reached Earth just 72 hours ago. Burned fields stretched across what had once been New Johannesburg's agricultural district. The fusion reactor that powered the colony's main settlement was nothing but a crater of radioactive glass. Of the 50,000 colonists who had been building their new world for 3 years, fewer than 800 survivors huddled in emergency shelters, their supplies dwindling. Kepler 442b was attacked 6 standard days ago, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. A world of farmers, scientists, and families. They had no weapons beyond basic mining equipment and atmospheric processors. The Corvan delegate, whose species bore a striking resemblance to Earth's ancient legends of dragons, leaned forward in its heated pod. Ambassador Chen, while we sympathize with any loss of life, the Assembly's procedures require that membership petitions focus on... Who did this? Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the aliens' formal protestations. The chamber fell silent. Interrupting another delegate during formal proceedings violated dozens of Assembly protocols. Sarah's own diplomatic staff shifted nervously behind her. Her assistant, Marcus Webb, took a half step forward as if to intervene. The Thylorian representative, a graceful being whose translucent skin revealed the complex organ systems beneath, spoke in melodic tones. "Young human, your grief is understandable, but accusations require evidence. Space is vast and dangerous. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, equipment failures. The attack came from orbital position," Sarah stated, her voice growing harder. "Directed energy weapons, kinetic bombardment. The survivors described ships, massive vessels that burned through Kepler 442b's atmosphere in perfect formation." She gestured to the display, which now showed tactical analysis data transmitted by the colony's dying defense satellites. "These are weapon signatures, not natural disasters, not accidents. Deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure." The assembly speaker raised its crystalline appendage again. "Ambassador Chen, if you have evidence of aggression against your colony, the appropriate forum is the Galactic Arbitration Council, not—" "The appropriate forum," Sarah said, taking another step forward, "is wherever the beings responsible for this massacre are sitting." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The Nexus Collective's humming shifted to a lower, more agitated frequency. Even species known for their emotional control began exchanging concerned glances. Sarah's eyes swept across the assembled representatives. Humanity had been studying galactic politics for decades, ever since first contact. They knew which species controlled the most territory, commanded the largest fleets, held the most influence in assembly decisions. The major powers sat in the center tiers of the amphitheater, their delegations surrounded by the ornate displays of their technological and cultural achievements. The hegemony of Keth occupied one of the largest platforms, their reptilian forms imposing even in the chamber's artificial gravity. They controlled 17 systems and were known for their aggressive expansion policies. The Stellar Dominion held nearly as much territory, their insectoid representatives clicking and chirping in their complex mathematical language. The Astral Federation, the Corporate Alliance, the Iron Throne Coalition, all of them mighty civilizations with fleets that could sterilize worlds. "Your colony was on the edge of disputed territory," offered the Catharian Prime Delegate, his voice a rumbling bass that required significant translation processing. "Perhaps they encountered automated defense systems from the old wars." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Automated systems that targeted farms and schools first, that jammed communication arrays before beginning bombardment, that left mineral extraction sites completely untouched?" She manipulated her holographic controls, and the display shifted to show mining surveys of Kepler 442b. "This world has significant deposits of rare earth elements, iridium, platinum, hafnium, materials essential for faster-than-light drive construction." The chamber's atmosphere grew more tense. Several smaller species began what appeared to be hurried conversations with their neighbors. The Valak speaker's crystalline form flickered with agitated patterns. "Ambassador Chen," the speaker said, its harmonics carrying clear warning tones, "the Assembly does not appreciate implications without concrete proof. If you have specific accusations to make—" "I don't have accusations," Sarah said, her voice rising. "I have a question." She turned to face the center tiers directly, her eyes moving from one major powers delegation to another. "Which of you decided that 50,000 human civilians needed to die for their planet's mineral resources?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even the constant background hum of translation devices seemed muted. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in the stillness. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice broke the quiet first, its insectoid form chittering rapidly before the translation came through. "The accusation is absurd. The Dominion has no interest in the Outer Rim territories where your species has been expanding. The hegemony of Keth likewise denies any involvement," the Catharian Prime Delegate added, though his reptilian features remained carefully neutral. "Our forces are engaged in legitimate security operations along our established borders." One by one, the major powers offered their denials, each statement carefully worded, legally precise, diplomatically correct. Sarah listened to them all, noting the subtle differences in their responses, the way some species seemed more nervous than others, the almost imperceptible hesitation before certain delegates spoke. The truth was somewhere in this chamber. She was certain of it. "The Assembly appreciates your grief," the Valak speaker finally said, its tone suggesting the matter was closed. "However, membership proceedings cannot be conducted under emotional duress. Perhaps humanity would benefit from postponing this petition until—" "No." The word came out harder than Sarah had intended. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien beings focused their attention on the small human platform with its delegation of 5 representatives from a species most had never heard of 6 months ago. "Humanity will not postpone anything," Sarah continued. "We came here believing that the Galactic Assembly represented civilized beings who valued peace, cooperation, and mutual protection. We wanted to join a community of worlds working together toward common goals." She gestured again to the images of destruction still displayed behind her. "Instead, we find a collection of predators who view newly established colonies as opportunities for resource acquisition, who measure the value of civilian lives against mineral extraction profits." The chamber erupted in outraged protests. Multiple delegates began speaking at once, their translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. The Nexus Collective's harmonic humming reached agitated peaks that made several species cover their auditory organs. Through the chaos, Sarah's voice cut clear and strong. "You want to know what humanity brings to this assembly? You want to know what makes us worthy of membership among the great civilizations of the galaxy?" The Valak speaker was attempting to restore order, its crystalline form flashing rapid patterns that indicated high stress levels. "Ambassador Chen, you must maintain proper decorum." "We remember our dead," Sarah shouted over the growing din. "We honor our fallen, and we never ever forgive those who murder our families for profit." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quiet carried a different quality. Less shock, more calculation. Sarah could almost feel the collective intelligence of the assembly processing her words, analyzing the implications, measuring the potential threat. Marcus Webb stepped closer to her, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, we need to dial this back. You're making enemies of every major power in the galaxy." "Good," Sarah replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "Let them know exactly who they're dealing with." The Thylorian representative spoke again, its melodic tones carrying what might have been genuine concern. "Ambassador Chen, surely you understand the position you are placing your species in. Humanity controls 12 systems. The assembled powers in this chamber control thousands. Your total population numbers in the low billions. The collective military might represented here could—" "Could what?" Sarah interrupted. "Destroy us? Wipe out our colonies? Exterminate our entire species?" She let out a harsh laugh. "You think we don't already know that? You think we came here naive about the balance of power?" She moved to the edge of her platform, her hands gripping the railing. "Let me tell you what you don't know about humanity. We've faced extinction before. Natural disasters, wars, plagues, our own stupidity. We've stood at the edge of oblivion multiple times in our history, and every single time, we chose to fight rather than submit." The holographic display behind her shifted again, this time showing images from Earth's history. Not the peaceful diplomatic presentation humanity had originally prepared, but something else entirely. Footage of human conflicts, disasters survived, impossible odds overcome. "This is the Battle of Stalingrad," Sarah said as the display showed scenes of urban warfare in the depths of winter. "My species fought house to house, room to room for months in sub-zero temperatures. They literally ran out of ammunition and continued fighting with knives and rocks. The image changed. The city of London during the Blitz, nightly bombing raids for 8 months. Did they surrender? Did they evacuate? They held concerts in underground tunnels and went to work the next morning while their city burned around them. Another shift. The siege of the Alamo. 189 people against an army of thousands. They could have surrendered. They could have fled. They chose to fight to the last person. Sarah's voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. You want to know why someone felt safe attacking a human colony? Because they thought we were just another species that would file a complaint and accept whatever compensation you offered. They thought wrong. The Catharian Prime Delegate's reptilian features showed what might have been amusement. Brave words from a species with no significant military force. Your passion is admirable, Ambassador. But passion does not triumph over plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes. Doesn't it? Sarah asked, turning to face him directly. Tell me, Prime Delegate, how many species have the major powers absorbed in the past 1,000 years? How many civilizations have chosen to surrender rather than fight impossible odds? The delegate's expression grew more cautious. Expansion and integration are natural processes in galactic development. How many? Sarah repeated. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, the Stellar Dominion's primary voice provided the answer. Database indicates approximately 2,300 species have chosen peaceful integration rather than resistance when faced with superior force. 2,300, Sarah repeated. And how many have chosen to fight to extinction rather than submit? This time, the silence stretched longer. Species across the chamber exchanged uncertain glances. Even the most advanced civilizations seemed reluctant to answer. Finally, the Thylorian representative spoke. The number is significantly smaller, perhaps 12 to 15 species in the past millennium. 12 to 15 in 1,000 years, Sarah nodded. Less than 1% choose death over surrender. Do you know what we call beings who always choose the sensible option? Who always surrender when faced with overwhelming odds? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. Prey. The word landed in the chamber like a physical blow. Sarah could see the ripples of discomfort spreading through the assembled delegates as they processed the implications. Humanity has never been prey, she continued. We've been hunters since we climbed down from the trees. We've been warriors since we learned to shape stone into weapons. We've been survivors since the first ice age tried to freeze us into extinction. The holographic display now showed images of human exploration and expansion. Not the peaceful colonial scenes from the original presentation, but something more revealing. Humans working in the vacuum of space without environmental suits, teams establishing settlements on worlds with atmospheric toxins that would kill most species in minutes, colonies thriving on planets with radiation levels that should have been uninhabitable. Your species establish colonies on garden worlds, Sarah observed, gesturing toward the various atmospheric pods that kept alien delegates comfortable. We colonize anywhere we can build a habitat. Your fleets avoid systems with unstable stars. We mine them for rare isotopes. Your explorers map safe hyperlane routes. We punch through dark nebulae and gravity wells that your ships won't even approach. The chamber had grown completely still. Even species known for constant movement had ceased their normal fidgeting and communication rituals. So when someone decided to attack Kepler 442b, Sarah continued, they made a fundamental miscalculation. They thought they were hitting a soft target, a new species that would be shocked, frightened, confused by sudden violence. She stepped back to her holographic controls and brought up a new image. Earth, as seen from orbit, its blue and white surface serene and beautiful. This is our homeworld, 71% water. 29% land mass, with an atmospheric composition that most of you would consider mildly toxic. It has an active magnetic field that deflects cosmic radiation, but that same field causes electronic interference that makes precision navigation difficult. Weather patterns range from tropical storms with wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour to winter conditions that can freeze exposed skin in minutes. The display zoomed in, showing various regions of Earth's surface. We have regions of perpetual ice where the temperature never rises above the freezing point of water. We have deserts where the surface temperature reaches levels that would cook most proteins. We have jungle regions where the humidity approaches 100% and thousands of species compete for the same ecological niche. We have mountain ranges where the atmospheric pressure drops so low that most beings would lose consciousness within minutes. Sarah's voice carried a quiet pride now. The anger still present, but channeled into something more controlled. And in every one of those environments, you'll find humans. Not just surviving, but thriving. Building cities, raising families, creating art and music and literature. We don't just adapt to hostile environments, we make them into homes. The Nexus Collective's humming had dropped to barely audible levels. The insectoid intelligence seemed to be processing vast amounts of information, their shared consciousness working to understand the implications of what they were hearing. The beings who attacked Kepler 442b expected human colonists to behave like most species, Sarah continued. They expected panic, confusion, desperate pleas for rescue or negotiation. They expected the survivors to abandon the colony and flee to safer territory. She brought up another image. The emergency shelters where Kepler 442b's survivors had taken refuge. But these weren't the temporary structures one might expect. They were already being expanded, reinforced, connected by underground tunnels. Gardens were being established. Workshop areas were being cleared. Instead, they found humans doing what humans do. They're rebuilding. With nothing but emergency supplies and whatever they could salvage from the attack, they're making that planet into their home again. The Valek speaker's crystalline form flickered with patterns that suggested deep confusion. Ambassador Chen, surely your government will evacuate the survivors? The colony is no longer viable without proper infrastructure. The survivors voted, Sarah interrupted. Unanimously, they're staying. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. The concept seemed to genuinely confuse several species. The Thylorian representative spoke first. They voted to remain on a world that has been attacked, without adequate defenses, without significant industrial capacity. They voted to rebuild stronger, Sarah corrected. They voted to honor their fallen by refusing to let terrorism drive them away. They voted like humans. She turned to address the chamber as a whole once again. So whoever ordered that attack achieved nothing. 50,000 humans died, and that world now contains 800 humans who are absolutely certain they're never leaving. Humans who have been personally and directly harmed by galactic civilization. Humans who now have a very good understanding of how the major powers operate. Sarah paused, noting the growing unease among several delegations. But more importantly, they've sent a message that will reach every human colony in the next few weeks. Earth's communication networks are already spreading the word. Kepler 442b was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, not an unfortunate encounter with automated defenses. It was a calculated attack by someone in this very chamber. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop again. Multiple species began urgent consultations with their advisors and communication specialists. Ambassador Chen, the Stellar Dominion's primary voice, chittered rapidly. You cannot possibly mean to suggest that humanity would take aggressive action against member species of the Assembly without proof of their involvement. Sarah's smile held no warmth whatsoever. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you exactly what happens next. The silence that followed Sarah's words was unlike anything the Galactic Assembly had experienced in its 3,000-year history. Even the automated systems seemed to pause, their gentle humming reduced to barely perceptible background noise. Hundreds of different species, each with their own evolutionary responses to threat detection, were all displaying the same basic reaction: the careful stillness of predators suddenly realizing they might have misidentified their prey. Sarah stood at the edge of her platform, her hands still gripping the railing, watching the ripple effects of her statement spread through the vast amphitheater. She could see calculation replacing confusion in alien faces. The major powers were beginning to understand that this was no longer a routine membership petition. The Corporate Alliance delegate, a being whose artificial enhancements had long since replaced most of its original biology, spoke first. Its voice carried the flat, emotionless tone of someone accustomed to reducing all interactions to profit-loss calculations. Ambassador Chen, perhaps we should discuss this matter more privately. The assembly chamber is hardly the appropriate venue for such sensitive accusations. Sensitive? Sarah laughed, the sound sharp enough to make several nearby species flinch. 50,000 dead colonists. And you're worried about sensitivity? She gestured to her holographic display, which now showed real-time feeds from human space. News broadcasts from Earth, emergency session recordings from the Colonial Council, military briefings from the Human Defense Fleet. Let me tell you what's happening in human space right now, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Every single colony world has declared a state of emergency. Our entire merchant marine has been recalled to protected space lanes. Our deep space exploration missions have been converted to armed reconnaissance patrols. The images on her display shifted to show the mobilization taking place across human territory, civilian vessels being retrofitted with defensive systems. Industrial complexes shifting production to military hardware, training centers overflowing with volunteers. Our shipyards, which have been producing cargo haulers and research vessels for the past decade, have switched to a war footing. Our asteroid mining operations are now extracting materials for military use. Our research facilities are developing new weapons systems. The hegemony of Keth's prime delegate leaned forward in his heated pod. Ambassador, these preparations seem excessive for a species seeking to join our peaceful assembly. Peaceful? Sarah's voice rose several octaves. You call this peaceful? Someone in this chamber ordered the massacre of an entire colony, and you're concerned about our military preparations? She manipulated her controls again, bringing up tactical displays that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The human response to Kepler 442b isn't excessive. It's insufficient. Right now, every major power in this chamber could attack any human world and expect minimal resistance. Our fleets are small, our defenses are limited, our technology is generations behind yours. The Nexus Collective's harmonic humming shifted to frequencies that suggested deep analytical processing. Their shared consciousness was clearly working through complex calculations. But here's what you don't understand about humans, Sarah continued. We don't just react to threats, we evolve to overcome them. Every challenge that doesn't kill us becomes a strength we never lose. She brought up historical data from humanity's past, but this time the focus was different. Not just battles and survival, but adaptation and innovation under pressure. When early humans faced predators with claws and fangs, we invented tools. When we faced cold that should have killed us, we invented clothing and fire. When we faced diseases that wiped out entire populations, we invented medicine. When we faced the vacuum of space that should have contained us forever, we invented starships. The display showed the progression of human technology, compressed into rapid visual summaries. Stone tools becoming metal weapons, animal skins becoming advanced fabrics, herbal remedies becoming genetic therapies, chemical rockets becoming faster than light drives. Every single advancement came from facing something that should have destroyed us and refusing to accept defeat. We don't just solve problems, we become immune to them. The Thylorian representative spoke in its melodic tones, though now those tones carried a note of genuine concern. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that humanity views the attack on your colony as an evolutionary pressure? I'm not suggesting anything, Sarah replied. I'm telling you exactly how this works. Someone wanted to test human resolve? Congratulations, you just accelerated human military development by approximately 50 years. She brought up new images, prototype weapon systems under development on multiple human worlds, research data flowing between colonies at unprecedented rates, military academies expanding their programs, defense contractors receiving unlimited funding authorizations. 3 days ago, the biggest military challenge facing humanity was deterring pirates in the outer systems. Today, our entire species is focused on a single question. How do we become strong enough to ensure this never happens again? The Iron Throne Coalition's representative, a massive being whose species had evolved on a high-gravity world, spoke in deep, rumbling tones. The mathematics are clear, human. Your species lacks the industrial capacity, the resource base, and the technological foundation to threaten established galactic powers. These preparations, while admirable, cannot change fundamental limitations. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut vacuum. You're thinking like prey again. She gestured to her display, which now showed economic data from human space. You see industrial limitations. We see opportunities for growth. You see resource constraints. We see incentives for efficiency. You see technological gaps. We see targets for innovation. The data flowing across the holographic screen showed the human economy transforming in real time. Trade routes being restructured, resource allocation being optimized for military production, research and development budgets being increased by factors of 10 or more. But most importantly, you see 12 isolated star systems with small populations. We see 47 billion humans who just learned that someone considers them acceptable casualties in a resource grab. The chamber's atmosphere grew noticeably more tense. Several smaller species began what appeared to be hurried evacuations from the amphitheater. They might not understand all the political implications, but they clearly recognized the signs of an impending conflict between major powers. The Valek speaker's crystalline form flickered with agitated patterns. Ambassador Chen, the Assembly appreciates your species' determination, but we must address the practical realities. Even with accelerated development, humanity cannot realistically challenge established galactic powers within any reasonable time frame. How long do you think we need? Sarah asked. The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. The speaker's patterns shifted to what might have been confusion. I'm sorry? How long do you think it would take humanity to become a threat to whoever ordered the Kepler 442b attack? Sarah clarified. Give me your best estimate. The major powers exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't a typical diplomatic negotiation. Most species approached galactic politics with carefully calculated long-term strategies. Humans seem to be treating it like a tactical problem with immediate solutions required. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice chittered rapidly before responding. Mathematical models suggest that significant military capability development would require perhaps 2 to 3 centuries, assuming optimal resource allocation and technological advancement. 2 to 3 centuries, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. That's interesting. She brought up a new display showing human space from a different perspective. Instead of individual star systems, the image showed network connections, communication lines, trade routes, resource flows, population movements. Here's what you're not seeing, Sarah said. You're thinking about this like a traditional arms race. Build bigger ships, develop better weapons, train larger armies. But humans don't just compete. We innovate. The display zoomed in on specific aspects of human space infrastructure. While you're calculating how long it would take us to build a fleet capable of challenging yours, we're already solving the real problem. She manipulated the controls, highlighting specific locations throughout human territory. These are our research facilities, not military research. Civilian technology development that can be rapidly converted to military applications. New data streams appeared, showing the pace of innovation across human space. This is our rate of technological advancement. Notice anything unusual? The Nexus Collective's humming increased in frequency as their shared intelligence processed the information. Finally, their harmonic response translated into understandable communication. The advancement rate is exponential. This pattern is not typical of established galactic civilizations. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Most species reach a technological plateau and maintain steady, incremental progress. Humans haven't reached a plateau yet. Our rate of innovation is still accelerating. She brought up comparative data showing human technological development versus other species' historical patterns. The average galactic civilization achieves faster-than-light travel approximately 800 years after developing industrial technology. Humans achieved it in less than 400. The average civilization requires 600 years to establish sustainable off-world colonies. Humans did it in 200. The average civilization needs 300 years to develop artificial intelligence. We did it in 50. The chamber was completely silent now. Even species known for constant movement had ceased all activity. The implications were beginning to sink in. So when you calculate that we need 2 centuries to develop military capability equivalent to yours, you're using mathematical models based on species that innovate at normal rates, Sarah continued. But we're not normal. We're still in our rapid expansion phase. The corporate alliance delegate's artificial voice carried a note of concern that its emotion suppression systems couldn't entirely eliminate. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that humanity could achieve technological parity with major galactic powers in significantly less time than projected? I'm suggesting that whoever attacked Kepler 442b just gave 47 billion innovative, aggressive, and extremely motivated humans a single shared goal, Sarah replied. I'm suggesting that every human scientist, engineer, and researcher is now focused on military applications. I'm suggesting that our entire species has just been united by a common enemy. She brought up population and education statistics from human space. We graduate approximately 2 million scientists and engineers every year. Our industrial capacity doubles every 15 years. Our computational power increases by a factor of 10 every decade. The data painted a picture that clearly disturbed several delegations. The major powers had grown accustomed to dealing with established civilizations whose development curves had flattened out centuries or millennia ago. The idea of a species still in exponential growth phase, dedicating their entire civilization to military advancement, was something outside their normal experience. But here's the real problem with your calculations, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a more conversational tone that somehow made her words even more ominous. You're assuming we'll try to match your capabilities using your methods. She gestured to the assembled delegations. Look around this chamber. How many different military doctrines are represented here? How many different approaches to warfare? After a moment of consideration, the Iron Throne Coalition's representative responded. Standard galactic military doctrine has evolved over millennia to optimize efficiency and minimize resource expenditure. While tactical variations exist, fundamental strategic principles remain consistent across all major powers. Consistent, Sarah nodded. Predictable. Traditional. Her holographic display shifted again, this time showing military exercises and war games from human space. But these weren't conventional fleet maneuvers. They were scenarios that seemed to violate normal tactical assumptions. This is footage from our Naval Academy. Notice anything interesting about our training scenarios? The assembled delegates studied the images with growing confusion. Human military exercises seem to involve situations that no rational commander would enter. Fleets operating in unstable star systems. Ground forces establishing positions on worlds with hostile environments, naval battles taking place in asteroid fields and nebulae where sensor systems would be severely compromised. The Thylorian representative spoke first. These scenarios appear inadvisable. The tactical disadvantages imposed by environmental factors would seem to outweigh any strategic benefits. To you, Sarah agreed, because you've spent millions of years evolving to avoid unnecessary risks. Your species survived by being cautious, by avoiding dangerous environments, by choosing battles you knew you could win. She highlighted specific aspects of the human exercises. We evolved by being willing to fight in the dark, by establishing settlements in places that should have killed us, by treating environmental hazards as tactical advantages rather than obstacles to overcome. The display showed more examples. Human ships operating in the coronas of stars, using solar radiation to mask their sensor signatures. Ground forces using a planet's extreme weather as cover for military operations. Naval units conducting repairs inside nebulae that would disable most species' equipment. While you've been perfecting efficient military doctrine, we've been learning how to fight in places where your doctrine doesn't apply, Sarah continued. You've optimized for conventional warfare. We've specialized in making every fight unconventional. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice chittered with what might have been growing alarm. Ambassador Chen, these tactics, while creative, cannot overcome fundamental advantages in numbers and technology. Asymmetric warfare has limitations. Does it? Sarah interrupted. Tell me about the Kythera campaign. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. Several major powers exchanged very careful glances. Even species known for emotional control showed signs of discomfort. After a long pause, the hegemony of Keth's prime delegate responded carefully. The Kythera campaign was a historical conflict involving multiple galactic powers. The details are not relevant to current proceedings. The Kythera were a small, technologically inferior species who refused to accept integration into the expanding galactic community, Sarah said, clearly having done her research. When diplomatic pressure failed to convince them to surrender their homeworld's resources, a coalition of major powers launched a military intervention. She brought up historical data from the Assembly's own archives. The coalition included over 400 warships from 6 different civilizations. The Kythera had fewer than 20 vessels and technology approximately 2 centuries behind standard galactic levels. The assembled delegates grew very still. This was clearly a topic that many preferred not to discuss. The campaign was projected to last 6 standard days, Sarah continued. Instead, it lasted 14 months. The Kythera refused to engage in conventional battles. They used asteroid fields, solar flares, gravitational anomalies, and environmental hazards to neutralize technological advantages. They fought from the shadows, struck without warning, and melted away before superior forces could respond. She paused, letting the historical parallel sink in. When the coalition finally claimed victory, they had lost over 60% of their fleet. The Kythera homeworld was uninhabitable, but the surviving population had already evacuated to hidden colonies in systems too dangerous for coalition ships to follow. The Corporate Alliance delegate's voice carried a distinct note of warning. The Kythera eventually went extinct, Ambassador Chen. Their resistance was admirable but ultimately futile. Did they? Sarah asked. According to Assembly records, contact was lost with Kythera survivors approximately 800 years ago. Their hidden colonies were never located. For all anyone knows, they could still be out there, building strength in systems too hostile for anyone else to explore. She turned to address the major powers directly. The Kythera had a technological disadvantage of 2 centuries and a population in the millions. Humanity has a technological disadvantage of perhaps 50 years and a population in the billions. We have advantages the Kythera never possessed. Sarah's display shifted to show the breadth of human space and the diversity of environments where humans had established permanent settlements. We already operate in stellar environments that most species consider too dangerous to approach. We already have hidden facilities in asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, and stellar coronas. We already have experience surviving and fighting in conditions that disable conventional military systems. The chamber's atmosphere had grown thick with tension. Multiple species were now engaged in urgent, hushed conversations with their advisors and military attachés. But most importantly, Sarah continued, we have something the Kythera didn't have. We have 47 billion people who just learned that membership in your civilized galactic community means accepting that our families are acceptable casualties in someone else's resource calculations. She gestured broadly to encompass the entire assembly. The Kythera fought alone against a coalition. Humanity will fight knowing that every major power in this chamber is a potential threat. We won't be trying to preserve our civilization. We'll be trying to become strong enough to threaten yours. The Valak speaker's crystalline form flickered rapidly, patterns shifting through sequences that suggested extreme agitation. Ambassador Chen, these statements approach the level of formal threats against Assembly member states. Such language could be construed as justification for preemptive action. Sarah's smile was colder than vacuum. Preemptive action? Against what? I haven't threatened anyone. I've simply explained the consequences of your members' actions. She brought up her final display. Real-time communication feeds from across human space, messages flowing between colonies, research data being shared, resource allocation being coordinated, military planning sessions being conducted. Right now, every human world is asking the same questions, Sarah said. Who attacked Kepler 442b? How do we identify them? How do we make sure they can never do it again? How do we make the cost of attacking human civilians higher than any possible benefit? The feeds showed the intensity of activity across human space, not panic, not confusion, but focused, determined preparation. Those questions are being answered by 47 billion people with access to the accumulated knowledge and resources of 12-star systems. People who specialize in solving impossible problems under extreme pressure. People who consider environmental hazards to be engineering challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. Sarah paused, watching the effects of her words ripple through the chamber. So when you ask how long humanity needs to become a threat, you're asking the wrong question. We already are a threat. We're a threat to anyone who thinks attacking human civilians is an acceptable business strategy. We're a threat to anyone who views our colonies as convenient targets for resource acquisition. We're a threat to anyone who believes that superior technology makes them immune to consequences. She stepped back from the edge of her platform, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast amphitheater. The only question now is, which of you ordered the attack on Kepler 442b? The question hung in the air like a gravitational field, bending the very atmosphere of the chamber around its implications. Sarah Chen stood motionless at her platform's edge, her dark eyes moving methodically from one major power delegation to another, watching for the telltale signs that would reveal the guilty party. She didn't have to wait long. The corporate alliance delegates' artificial systems were designed to optimize efficiency in all situations, including emotional regulation. But even advanced technology had limitations when dealing with the stress of exposure. Sarah caught the microsecond hesitation in its response protocols, the infinitesimal delay as its decision-making algorithms calculated optimal reactions to an unexpected threat. More telling was the subtle shift in the hegemony of Keth's body language. The prime delegate's reptilian features maintained perfect diplomatic neutrality, but his clawed hands had moved fractionally closer to his personal communication device, a defensive gesture. Unconscious but unmistakable to someone trained in human behavioral analysis. But it was the Stellar Dominion's response that confirmed Sarah's suspicions. The insectoid primary voice had begun the characteristic chittering pattern that preceded complex mathematical communications within their species. Not the calm, analytical discussions they used for normal assembly business. This was the rapid-fire exchange pattern employed during crisis management. "Interesting," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. 3 different species, 3 different stress responses, but only one of you is calculating extraction routes. The Stellar Dominion's delegation froze mid-conversation. Around the chamber, other species began to focus their attention on the insectoid representatives with growing understanding. Sarah's holographic display shifted, bringing up detailed tactical analysis data that made several delegates lean forward in their seats. "The attack on Kepler 442b was conducted with surgical precision," she said, her tone becoming clinical, analytical. "Kinetic bombardment of specific infrastructure targets, energy weapon strikes designed to minimize collateral damage to mineral extraction sites, jamming protocols that disabled communications without destroying the transmission equipment itself." She highlighted specific aspects of the attack pattern. This level of precision requires detailed intelligence about human colonial infrastructure. Not the kind of information available from standard assembly database entries, specific knowledge of our construction methods, our resource priorities, our defensive limitations. The chamber had grown absolutely silent. Even the background hum of translation devices seemed muted. Intelligence that could only be gathered by someone who had been watching human space for an extended period. Someone who had cataloged our expansion patterns, studied our colonial development strategies, analyzed our industrial capabilities. Sarah brought up communication logs from the months preceding the attack. For the past year, the Stellar Dominion has been requesting detailed economic data about human colonies, trade manifests, population statistics, industrial output reports. They claimed it was for potential partnership development. The primary voice's chittering reached agitated peaks. These were legitimate economic surveys. The Dominion has extensive trade relationships throughout the galaxy. "With established species," Sarah interrupted. "Your trade partnerships are with civilizations that have been part of the galactic community for centuries. Why the sudden interest in a backwater species that had barely achieved interstellar travel?" She gestured to her display, which now showed comprehensive analysis of Stellar Dominion economic patterns. "Your species specializes in resource extraction optimization. You've perfected techniques for maximizing mineral yields from planetary surfaces. Your industrial methods require specific rare earth elements in large quantities." The evidence was building like a prosecution case. Around the chamber, other species were beginning to understand the implications. The Nexus Collective's harmonic humming had shifted to frequencies that suggested intense analytical focus. Kepler 442b's mineral surveys showed the largest concentration of hafnium and platinum in any human-controlled system, Sarah continued. "Elements that are essential for your manufacturing processes. Elements that you've been importing at increasing cost as local sources become depleted." The corporate alliance delegate spoke, its artificial voice carefully neutral. "Economic motivation does not constitute proof of military action. Many species have resource requirements that might theoretically benefit from territorial expansion." "True," Sarah acknowledged, "but only one species had advanced knowledge of the colonial militia's patrol schedules." The statement hit the chamber like a kinetic weapon. The Stellar Dominion's delegation erupted in agitated chittering, their mathematical language creating a cacophony of overlapping protests and denials. Sarah's display showed communication intercepts that made the evidence undeniable. 3 days before the attack, automated monitoring stations detected stellar Dominion reconnaissance drones conducting detailed scans of Kepler 442b's orbital defenses. The drones transmitted real-time data about patrol patterns and defensive capabilities. She brought up tactical analysis from the colony's destroyed sensor networks. The attacking fleet arrived during the 4-hour window when both defensive satellites would be on the opposite side of the planet. They knew exactly when to strike for maximum effect with minimal resistance. The Thylorian representative spoke in melodic tones that carried obvious shock. Primary voice, these accusations are extremely serious. If evidence exists of Dominion involvement in unprovoked aggression against civilian targets, the evidence is circumstantial, the primary voice chittered rapidly. Correlation does not establish causation. The Dominion's commercial interests do not constitute justification for these inflammatory accusations. Sarah's smile held no warmth whatsoever. You're right. Circumstantial evidence wouldn't be sufficient for a formal accusation. She gestured to her display one final time, bringing up data that made even the most composed delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Fortunately, we have direct evidence. The holographic screen now showed recordings from Kepler 442b's industrial monitoring systems. Equipment designed to track mining operations and resource extraction had captured something far more significant: clear imagery of the attacking vessels. These recordings were transmitted to our emergency communication satellites before the main colony transmitters were destroyed, Sarah explained. The attacking fleet made no attempt to disable our monitoring equipment because they assumed it was only designed to track civilian mining operations. The images were unmistakably clear. Stellar Dominion warships, their distinctive geometric hull configurations visible against the planet's atmosphere. Ship registry numbers were readable on several vessels. Fleet Squadron Designation Harvest 7, Sarah read from the data stream. Registered to the Stellar Dominion Colonial Expansion Authority, commanded by Fleet Commander Designation Sharpwing 779. The chamber erupted in chaos. Multiple species began urgent communications with their home governments. The major powers started intense huddles with their military advisors. Several smaller species began what appeared to be immediate evacuations from the assembly hall. Through the noise, the Stellar Dominion's primary voice continued its rapid protests. These images prove nothing. Fleet movements in that sector were part of routine patrol operations. Any apparent targeting of human installations was defensive in nature. Defensive? Sarah's voice cut through the din like a vibroblade. You're claiming that orbital bombardment of agricultural facilities was a defensive action? She brought up specific footage from the attack. This is footage of your ships targeting the primary school in New Johannesburg, children aged 6 to 16. Please explain the defensive necessity of eliminating educational facilities. The chamber fell silent again. Even species known for their aggressive territorial instincts seemed disturbed by the implications. This is footage of your fleet specifically targeting medical facilities, Sarah continued, her voice growing colder. Hospitals and emergency treatment centers. Please explain how healing the wounded constitutes a military threat. The primary voice's chittering had become erratic, no longer following normal mathematical communication patterns. These facilities could have been used for military purposes. Standard doctrine requires neutralization of dual-use infrastructure. Dual use? Sarah stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. You're claiming that a children's playground constitutes dual-use military infrastructure? The footage now showed the systematic destruction of civilian targets that had no possible military value. Community centers, recreational facilities, art installations, memorial gardens honoring the colony's early pioneers. Your fleet spent 6 hours conducting this defensive operation, Sarah continued. 6 hours systematically destroying everything that made Kepler 442b a home instead of just a mining operation. 6 hours murdering families whose only crime was building a life on a world rich in resources you wanted. The Corporate Alliance delegate's artificial voice carried a note of calculation. While these actions appear excessive, the fundamental issue remains one of territorial jurisdiction. The Outer Rim territories lack clear sovereignty claims under assembly law. Sovereignty? Sarah turned on the artificial being with fury that made several nearby species flinch. Are you seriously suggesting that legal technicalities justify mass murder? She gestured broadly to encompass the entire chamber. Is this how galactic civilization operates? The strong take what they want from the weak, and you debate legal frameworks while families burn? The Valek speaker attempted to restore order, its crystalline form flashing patterns that indicated maximum stress. Ambassador Chen, while these revelations are deeply disturbing, assembly procedures require formal investigation and... Formal investigation? Sarah's laugh was harsh enough to make the chamber's acoustic systems distort. How long would that take? How many committees and subcommittees and review panels would need to examine the evidence? How many years would pass while bureaucrats debate whether murdering children violates galactic law? She brought up new displays, showing activity throughout human space. The mobilization that had begun after news of the attack was accelerating beyond anything the Assembly had seen before. While you debate procedures, humanity is implementing solutions, Sarah announced. Our deep space reconnaissance fleets have already located 3 stellar Dominion mining operations in disputed territory. Our naval units are moving to intercept their resource extraction convoys. Our research facilities have identified vulnerabilities in their ship designs that we're already exploiting. The Stellar Dominion's delegation erupted in panicked chittering. Around the chamber, other species began urgent discussions about the implications of open conflict between galactic powers. This is exactly what we warned you about, Sarah continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast amphitheater. You thought you could attack human civilians without consequences. You thought we would file complaints and accept whatever compensation you offered. You thought wrong. Her display now showed real-time tactical data from human space, naval units moving to intercept stellar Dominion vessels, ground forces preparing for deployment to contested worlds, industrial facilities switching to full military production. The Stellar Dominion has approximately 400 capital ships and control over 37 star systems, Sarah stated. Humanity has 42 capital ships and control over 12 systems. By any rational military analysis, we don't stand a chance in direct confrontation. She paused, letting that assessment sink in. Fortunately, we don't plan to fight fair. The tactical displays shifted, showing the unconventional nature of human military preparations. Ships being modified for operations in stellar coronas and asteroid fields. Ground forces training for combat in extreme environments. Weapons being developed specifically to exploit the environmental vulnerabilities of insectoid physiology. While you've been perfecting efficient military doctrine for conventional battles, we've been learning to fight in places where conventional doctrine doesn't apply, Sarah explained. Your ships are optimized for normal space operations. Ours are designed to operate in hostile environments that would disable your sensor systems and navigation equipment. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice chittered desperately. These threats are meaningless. Human military capabilities are insignificant compared to established galactic powers, even with environmental advantages. Are they? Sarah interrupted. Tell me about the mining convoy, Prosperity 77. The primary voice fell silent mid-chitter. Around the chamber, representatives leaned forward with obvious interest. Prosperity 77 was a Stellar Dominion resource extraction convoy that disappeared in the Aldebaran system 6 hours ago, Sarah explained. 12 ships, including 2 military escorts. They were operating in a disputed asteroid field, extracting rare Earth elements without local authorization. Her display showed tactical data from the incident. They encountered what appeared to be equipment malfunctions. Navigation systems failed simultaneously across the entire convoy. Communication arrays stopped functioning. Life support systems began experiencing cascading failures. The assembled delegates studied the information with growing understanding. This wasn't equipment malfunction. This was sabotage conducted with surgical precision. By the time the convoy realized they were under attack, half their ships were already disabled, Sarah continued. The attacking vessels used the asteroid field's interference to mask their approach, struck without warning, and melted away before reinforcements could arrive. She brought up combat footage from the convoy's emergency transmitters, human ships appearing from behind asteroids like ghosts, their weapons specifically designed to exploit the vulnerabilities of stellar Dominion technology. No one was killed, Sarah noted. The crews were rescued and returned to Dominion space along with a message explaining that this was retaliation for Kepler 442b. The convoy's cargo was redistributed to human colonies to compensate for resources lost in your attack. The chamber had grown deathly quiet. Even species known for constant movement had ceased all activity. This is what asymmetric warfare looks like when conducted by beings who specialize in surviving impossible odds, Sarah explained. We don't try to match your capabilities. We make your capabilities irrelevant. The Corporate Alliance delegate's artificial voice carried obvious concern. Ambassador Chen, these actions constitute piracy under galactic law. Attacking civilian convoys regardless of political motivation. Civilian? Sarah's voice rose to near shouting levels. You want to discuss civilian targets? Let's discuss the families on Kepler 442b. Let's discuss children burning in their schools while Stellar Dominion civilians calculated optimal resource extraction rates. She gestured to the tactical displays showing ongoing human operations. Every Stellar Dominion facility in disputed territory is now a legitimate military target. Every convoy carrying resources extracted from contested worlds will be intercepted. Every ship belonging to the species that murdered our families will learn what it means to be hunted. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice attempted one final protest. These actions will escalate into full-scale conflict. The Dominion has allies. Other powers will not tolerate. Other powers? Sarah turned to address the chamber as a whole. Which powers are willing to defend a species that conducts orbital bombardments of schools and hospitals? Which civilizations want to be associated with child murderers and resource pirates? She let the question hang in the air while alien representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Because here's what happens next, Sarah continued. Humanity formally requests that the Galactic Assembly condemn the Stellar Dominion's unprovoked attack on civilian targets and authorize appropriate retaliation. If the Assembly refuses, we'll assume that every member species considers human families to be acceptable casualties in resource disputes. The threat was unmistakable. Around the chamber, delegates began urgent calculations about the political and military implications of the choice Sarah was forcing on them. If the Assembly authorizes action against the Dominion, we'll conduct limited operations focused on military targets and resource recovery, Sarah explained. If the Assembly refuses, we'll assume that every galactic power is a potential threat to human colonies and act accordingly. The Valak speaker's crystalline form flickered with patterns that suggested desperate attempts to find a peaceful resolution. Ambassador Chen? Surely some form of negotiated settlement? Negotiation? Sarah's laugh was sharp enough to make several species cover their auditory organs. You want us to negotiate with beings who murder children for mining rights? What exactly would we discuss? Acceptable casualty rates for future resource extractions? She brought up one final image. The memorial service being conducted on Kepler 442b for the 50,000 dead. Survivors standing in the ruins of their homes, refusing to abandon the world their families had died defending. The only acceptable outcome is justice, Sarah stated. The beings responsible for this massacre will face consequences. The Stellar Dominion will compensate the survivors and families of the dead. And the galactic community will decide whether it stands with civilization or with those who prey on the innocent. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than all her previous shouting. Choose wisely, because humanity is now watching to see which species consider our families to be expendable, and we have very long memories. The silence that followed was absolute. In the vast amphitheater of the Galactic Assembly, hundreds of different civilizations contemplated a choice they had never expected to face. Support justice for a small, newly arrived species against an established galactic power, or risk being marked as enemies by 47 billion humans who had just learned what their neighbors were truly capable of. The Stellar Dominion's primary voice broke the silence with a barely audible chitter. The Dominion requests immediate recess to consult with Home Authority regarding appropriate responses to these allegations. Sarah's smile was colder than the vacuum between stars. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. But as she spoke, data streams from human space showed the opposite. Across 12 star systems, humanity was very definitely going somewhere. They were going to war, and they were going to win it, regardless of how many centuries of conventional wisdom said it was impossible. After all, they were human. And humans had never been very good at accepting that things were impossible.